The Human Security Officer, Part 51. Gareth sat at the dining table, a small wooden structure that bore the marks of time and countless meals shared. He nibbled on a piece of bread, the texture soft and comforting, but the food hardly registered in his mind. Instead, his attention drifted toward Pen, who sat across from him, her focus entirely on the steaming bowl of stew in front of her. The sight was both fascinating and a little unnerving. Pen was a whirlwind of energy, her hands moving swiftly as she scooped up spoonfuls of the stew, barely pausing to breathe. To Gareth, it felt as if she were in a race against time itself, consumed by the simple pleasure of a warm meal. Each mouthful was accompanied by a series of satisfied sounds, various MMMs escaping her lips, underscoring her delight. After several minutes of this culinary spectacle, Pen finally looked up, her mouth full and cheeks puffed out like a chipmunk. "MHM, you not gonna?" she asked, pointing at the untouched stew with her spoon, a playful challenge in her eyes. "Probably not a good idea." Gareth hesitated, then pointed at her chin. "And Pen, you've got a bit of..." She mumbled, bringing her hand to her face. Her fingers found the remnants of stew on her chin, and she wiped it off casually with the back of her hand. "Oh, thanks," she said, her voice sheepish as she continued to devour the meal. Gareth winced at the sight, a pang of discomfort shooting through him at her lack of concern for cleanliness. He had grown up in a world where hygiene was paramount, where everything was meticulously organized, and where personal appearance reflected one's dignity. The chaos of Pen's eating habits was a stark contrast to the pristine standards he was raised with. As he sat there, lost in thought, he became acutely aware of his own frills, those delicate, pearly purple appendages sprouting from his head. He had caught himself fiddling with them again, an absent-minded habit that often betrayed his nerves. "What are those on your head anyway?" Pen interrupted, her curiosity piqued. "You're always messing with them." Gareth paused, momentarily surprised by her question. "I suppose you call them frills or spines, perhaps?" He wiggled them for her inspection. "They're a remnant from an earlier evolutionary stage. Not that they don't have use still. They function as sensory organs that detect vibrations. Not as helpful in air, but underwater, they're quite advantageous. You may be able to lift immense weights, but I bet I can see far better than you when submerged. That said, they're sensitive, so I keep them clean. It's terribly itchy if I don't." Pen mused, swallowing her last mouthful. "They look really cool. Like purple coral, but they shimmer like pearls." "Oh well, thank you," Gareth replied, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. Pen lifted her bowl to her face and downed the last remnants of the stew, setting it down with a satisfying thud. She belched loudly, a sound that echoed in the small kitchen, and sighed contentedly. "That was fan-fucking-tastic." Gareth chuckled, shaking his head at her unabashed display of satisfaction. "You certainly seem to enjoy it. Home-cooked and fresh instead of sealed ration packs or ever-preserved food substitutes? And after trudging through a forest for the better part of 2 days? You bet I did. I'm clean, I'm fed, and now it's time for the final part of the trifecta." She grinned, her energy palpable as she collected their plates, bowls, and silverware to bring to the sink. "Gonna guess our sleeping arrangements are that-a-way." She gestured toward a door adorned with a makeshift sign, a piece of paper taped haphazardly to it with arrows pointing inward. "Lead on," Gareth responded, hopping out of his chair. He followed her to the door, where Pen pushed it open to reveal a small but inviting guest room. A sturdy bed rested in the far corner, dressed with heavy quilts and fluffy pillows, while a couch that had been partially pulled out served as an additional sleeping space. Apart from the furniture, the room was bare, save for a small desk and a bookcase crammed with various titles on the left side of the door. Pen surveyed the room with a grin. "If you want the bed, I'm honestly thinking the couch would be more comfortable for me." "The bed's way too much." Gareth shot her a puzzled look. What? It's all right. I mean it. I don't want to steal the... Steal? Pen, you can have them both if you want. Remember, he reminded her, his brows knitting together in confusion. Oh right, you don't sleep. You don't even rest, she said, realization dawning on her. I might sit down and relax. I could close my eyes and meditate, but I'll probably just read, he replied, nodding toward the desk. Or say hello to our hosts when they return. He pointed back toward the door where their enigmatic hosts had gone. All right, well, she trailed off, unsure of her next words. By all means, he encouraged, waving her on. She approached the bed, nearly toppling into it as she flopped onto the mattress, dress and all. With a swift motion, she wriggled beneath the heavy covers, tossing pillows aside like they were mere feathers. Gareth hopped into the little wooden chair at the desk and pulled out his data pad. What are you reading? Pen asked, her voice muffled beneath the layers of blankets. He glanced over to see only part of her visible, the mattress enveloping her as she sank deeper into its embrace. Some early human literature, actually. Current events have inspired me. Oh, she replied, her interest piqued. Yes. I started with a fellow named Gilgamesh. An interesting read, though I think I may be missing a lot of context to fully appreciate it. Then I moved on to some literature by your namesake, stories of Odysseus sailing through Scylla and Charybdis. I believe I understand the implications of, well, why they would call you. Pen offered, her voice sleepy. Well, anyway. I found it fascinating how capricious and flawed those deities were. Very different from early Waylam religion. His mind drifted, circling back to what he'd seen on Samir's personal computer. He had gained a better understanding of their perception of Pen. From anyone else's perspective, all they knew was that one person had walked out of that tragedy while everyone else was left behind. Not that we had so many different early mythologies. I find it fascinating how varied the array of... Gareth's words trailed off, the verbal facade beginning to crumble. He had intended to ask Pen about what he had discovered or, at the very least, share his insights. But when the opportunity arose, the thought of respecting her privacy restrained him. Now, in the cocoon of quiet comfort, he felt the weight of his silence pressing down on him. Pen, I may have something to share with you, and I don't really know how to say it, he began, feeling a flutter of anxiety. I owe you an apology for not admitting it sooner. Your friend Samir showed me, or rather, allowed me to find, the footage of what happened. The building, the city, all of it. A heavy silence enveloped the room. I just felt you should know that I know, and I understand that you may not have wanted me to find out. I mean, Samir shares some blame, though he clearly had your best interests at heart. I can't imagine keeping something like, well, anyway. If you'd like an apology, I am. But before he could finish, a soft snore broke the silence. Pen was asleep. He stared in disbelief. She hadn't heard a single word he'd just said. Gareth sighed, frustration bubbling within him. You... Ugh. Whatever, if I don't say anything for a long while now, it's your damn fault. Hairless, primate. His frills shuddered with indignation as he rose from the chair. Just as he was about to leave the room, he froze mid-motion as Pen shifted beneath the covers. Had she woken up? Perhaps she was only pretending. Another loud snore echoed through the small room, and Gareth huffed, shaking his head in disbelief. Of course not. He stepped out into the hallway, his datapad in hand, and made his way to the cozy den of their temporary hosts. The warmth of the room enveloped him, the walls lined with bookshelves brimming with novels and knickknacks that hinted at a rich history. He settled onto the cushy couch, the softness enveloping him as he switched from literature to the latest news. The screen flickered to life, revealing a myriad of reports about new trade routes that had opened up, their implications rippling through the market. But amid the optimism, a darker narrative unfolded. Attacks were still occurring, escalating in frequency and ferocity. Gareth leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he read about the reports of ships vanishing without a trace. It wasn't piracy as he understood it. There were no survivors, no clear patterns to decipher. Bodies, when found, were often mutilated, the circumstances surrounding their deaths shrouded in mystery. Camera feeds were inexplicably blank, and navigational data was often scrubbed clean. Each article painted a picture of chaos, hinting at something sinister lurking beneath the surface. As he mulled over the information, Gareth's thoughts wandered back to the human male Penn had so brutally dealt with. What troubled him more than the violence was the silence surrounding the act. Why had the killer silenced that man? What information had he possessed that warranted such brutality? His musings were interrupted when the front door swung open, jolting him from his thoughts. Two women entered the room, laughter spilling from them like sunlight. They were older than Penn, but not by much, their presence exuding warmth and familiarity. One was shorter, broad-shouldered, with an earthy charm that spoke of strength. The other was tall, her wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over her features, yet her smile was bright. "Oh, hey there, little guy," the tall one exclaimed cheerfully, her voice like a melody. "Any of my whiskey left?" asked the other, her tone playful yet commanding. Gareth blinked, momentarily taken aback by their exuberance. "Ah, hello," he stammered, instinctively adjusting his posture to appear more formal. "What's your name?" the tall woman asked, leaning against the doorframe with a casual air. "I'm Gareth," he replied, unsure of what to make of the sudden shift in atmosphere. "Gareth, huh? Nice to meet you." "I'm Layla," the tall woman introduced herself, her voice warm and inviting. "And this is Iris." "Pleasure," Iris said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "So, Gareth, tell us, what's it like hanging out with our little explorer?" Gareth smiled politely, still adjusting to the lively energy of the room. "It's certainly interesting. Penn is quite the force of nature." Layla laughed, her amusement ringing through the air. "Oh, that she is. I hope she's not too much trouble for you." "She can be a handful." "Not at all," Gareth replied, chuckling. "I appreciate her company." "Good to hear. We've been waiting for you two to arrive." "It's been a bit too quiet around here without Penn's antics," Layla said, her eyes sparkling with affection for the girl they had clearly grown fond of. "Do you two live here?" Gareth inquired, curious about the dynamic between the three of them. "Yes, we do. This is our family home. We love hosting guests, especially those who could appreciate good food and good company," Iris replied, her tone matter-of-fact. "Speaking of food, what's for dinner?" Layla asked, glancing toward the kitchen, where the remnants of the meal still lingered. "I believe Penn just finished the stew," Gareth informed them, his lips curling into a grin at the memory of Penn's enthusiasm. "Ah, that girl. She devoured it, didn't she? I hope there's some left for us." Layla exclaimed, her laughter infectious. Gareth nodded, feeling a sense of warmth wash over him. In this house filled with laughter and the lingering scent of home-cooked meals, he felt a fleeting sense of belonging. For a moment, he forgot about the chaos outside, the reports of attacks and uncertainty. Instead, he savored the simple joy of human connection and camaraderie. As they settled into conversation, sharing stories and laughter, Gareth couldn't help but wonder how the events of the past few days would unfold. In a world rife with danger, he found solace in the bonds they were forming, even as the shadows loomed just beyond their sanctuary. As the evening wore on, Gareth found himself enveloped in a warm cocoon of companionship. The three women exchanged stories and laughter, their voices creating a symphony of connection that resonated deeply within him. He felt a stark contrast between the vibrant energy in the room and the turbulent events outside. "Tell us more about your adventures with Penn," Layla prompted, her eyes shining with curiosity. Gareth shifted in his seat, the cozy couch cradling him. "Well, I've only known her for a short while, but it's been quite an experience. She has a knack for finding trouble, or maybe trouble finds her," he said, chuckling softly. Iris laughed, her voice light and airy. "That sounds about right. Penn has always been the adventurous type. I can't recall how many times she's gotten herself into sticky situations." Gareth smiled, the warmth in his chest growing. "She does have a certain charm about her, doesn't she? It's hard not to be drawn into her energy." "Yes. She's like a spark of light in dark places," Layla agreed, her expression thoughtful. "But she can be reckless. We worry about her sometimes." The mention of worry tugged at Gareth's heartstrings. He remembered the footage he had seen, the destruction, the loss. He thought of Penn's haunted eyes when she spoke about her past, and a pang of concern settled within him. "I can understand that. It must be difficult for you, knowing the dangers she faces." Iris nodded, her expression somber. "It is. But we've always trusted her instincts. She has a way of finding her path, even when the odds seem against her." "And what about you, Gareth?" Layla asked, leaning forward. "What brings you here? What's your story?" He hesitated, weighing his words carefully. He wasn't one to divulge personal details lightly. I work in diplomatic relations. I've been exploring different worlds, trying to foster connections and understanding." "Sounds important," Iris remarked, admiration flickering in her eyes. "What do you think of our world?" "It's beautiful, yet complex," Gareth replied, finding himself immersed in the conversation. "There's a richness to the culture, a resilience in the people. But there's also an underlying tension that worries me." Layla's brow furrowed. "You mean the attacks?" Gareth nodded, his heart heavy. "Yes. It's troubling. The lack of information, the disappearances, it creates an atmosphere of fear. I can't help but feel it's a precursor to something larger." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Each woman exchanged glances, their expressions reflecting concern. "I think you're right," Layla finally said, her voice low. "There's something sinister at play. We've heard whispers, rumors of shadows lurking in the dark." "Whispers?" Gareth's interest piqued. "What kind of whispers?" Iris leaned closer, her tone conspiratorial. "Some say there's a group operating in the shadows, seeking power through chaos. They thrive on fear and uncertainty." Gareth felt a chill run down his spine. "And what do they want?" "No one knows for sure," Layla admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But we fear it's more than just greed. There's talk of a larger agenda, something that could threaten all of us." Gareth's mind raced as he processed their words. If what they said was true, it meant that the stakes were far higher than he had anticipated. "We need to stay vigilant. Knowledge is our greatest weapon against such threats." Layla nodded in agreement. "We'll keep our ears open. If anything arises, we'll make sure to let you know." "Thank you," Gareth replied, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He had come to this world seeking answers, and now he felt an obligation to protect those who had welcomed him so warmly. Just as the atmosphere began to shift back to lighter topics, the sound of a door creaking interrupted their conversation. Penn emerged from the guest room, rubbing her eyes as if waking from a deep slumber. "Did I miss something good?" she asked, yawning widely. "You missed quite the discussion," Layla teased, her smile infectious. "Gareth was just enlightening us on the state of the world." Penn grinned, her energy sparking back to life. "Well, I'm sure you've made it sound more interesting than it is." The world is a mess, but we can handle it. Right? Gareth felt a surge of admiration for her optimism. Absolutely. Together, we can face whatever challenges come our way. Now that's the spirit, Pen declared, her voice filled with enthusiasm. And just in time for a toast. A toast? Gareth asked, puzzled. Of course. To new friends, old adventures, and whatever chaos lies ahead. Pen raised an imaginary glass, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Cheers to that. Iris chimed in, laughter bubbling forth once again. Gareth couldn't help but smile as they raised their glasses, imaginary or not, finding solace in the camaraderie that enveloped them. In the face of uncertainty, they were united, ready to confront whatever shadows lurked on the horizon. The night wore on, the warmth of the cozy den wrapping around Gareth and his new companions like a comforting embrace. Stories flowed freely, filled with laughter and camaraderie as they shared tales of past adventures and future dreams. It felt as if time itself had paused, allowing them to revel in the moment, even if just for a little while. Yet, beneath the surface of their laughter, Gareth felt an unsettling sensation creeping back into his mind, the dark reality of the world outside. He knew they were surrounded by threats, shadows that lurked just beyond the borders of their sanctuary. As the evening progressed, the conversation shifted to tales of Pen's escapades. Gareth listened intently as she recounted her most thrilling adventures, from narrow escapes to unexpected encounters. He marveled at her fearlessness, but beneath his admiration lay a flicker of concern. He wanted to protect her, yet he knew he couldn't always shield her from the dangers she sought. "I can't believe you jumped off that cliff," Iris exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. Pen grinned, the thrill of the memory evident on her face. It was exhilarating. The rush of the wind, the water below, it was like flying. Gareth couldn't help but laugh at her exuberance. "You do realize that such reckless stunts could lead to dire consequences?" Pen waved her hand dismissively, her spirit unyielding. "Life's too short to be cautious all the time. Besides, it's not like I do it every day. Just once in a while." "Thank the stars for that." Layla chimed in, a playful smile dancing on her lips. "We wouldn't want you breaking any bones, now would we? Or worse," Gareth added, his expression serious for a moment. "You need to be careful, Pen. There are risks beyond the thrill of the moment." She met his gaze, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You worry too much, Gareth. I promise I can take care of myself." "I know you can," he replied, his voice softening. "But it's always better to have someone watching your back." "I appreciate that, really. But we all have our roles to play," Pen said, her tone shifting slightly. "Some of us are meant to take risks, and some are meant to be the cautious ones." Gareth felt a lump form in his throat at her words. "I guess that's true. But even the cautious ones need to learn how to embrace the unpredictable." Pen's smile faded slightly, her expression turning contemplative. "You're right. Sometimes, we have to step outside our comfort zones to grow." The conversation flowed easily again, laughter filling the room as they shifted topics, discussing local lore and legends of the world outside. But as Gareth listened, he couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was creeping closer, intertwining with their laughter. As the hours slipped away, Gareth eventually excused himself, feeling the weight of the day tugging at his eyelids. He knew he would need to rest soon, but the thought of stepping into the unknown outside made him hesitate. "Where are you off to?" Pen asked, her voice laced with curiosity as she noticed his departure. "I think I'll take a moment to gather my thoughts," he replied, giving her a reassuring smile. "I need to meditate before bed." Pen raised an eyebrow. "Meditate? Is that really necessary?" "It helps me clear my mind," Gareth explained, feeling a sense of calm wash over him at the thought. In these chaotic times, it's essential to maintain focus. "All right, if you say so," she replied, her expression softening. "Just don't be gone too long." "I'll miss you." He chuckled, feeling warmth spread through him at her words. "I won't be long, I promise." With that, he stepped out into the dimly lit corridor, the gentle hum of laughter fading behind him. As he walked, the familiar anxiety crept back in, a nagging sensation that something was amiss. Once he found a quiet corner, Gareth settled himself on the floor, closing his eyes and allowing the world to fade away. He focused on his breathing, inhaling deeply, feeling the tension release from his muscles. The shadows that threatened to overwhelm him began to retreat, and he found a semblance of peace within himself. But just as he began to sink into the tranquility, a noise echoed in the distance, a soft rustle, like whispers on the wind. Gareth's instincts kicked in, and he opened his eyes, alert and cautious. He strained to listen, heart pounding in his chest as the sound grew clearer, a voice, low and ominous, speaking in hushed tones. Unease washed over him as he stood, creeping closer to the source. Peering around the corner, Gareth's breath caught in his throat. In the dim light, he spotted two figures lurking near the entrance. They were dressed in dark clothing, their features obscured by shadow. Gareth's heart raced as he recognized the tension in the air, the unmistakable aura of danger. "What do we do now?" one figure whispered, their voice barely audible. "We wait," the other replied, a sense of finality lacing their tone. "Soon, we'll strike." Panic surged through Gareth as he realized the threat they posed to Penn and the others. He needed to act quickly. Stepping back silently, he retraced his steps, heart racing as he made his way back to the den. "Penn," he hissed urgently as he entered the room, his voice low but firm. The warmth of laughter and chatter faded instantly as the three women turned to him, concern etched across their faces. "What's wrong?" Penn asked, her expression shifting to worry. "There are people outside. They're planning something dangerous," Gareth warned, urgency coursing through him. "What do you mean?" Iris asked, rising from her seat. "I overheard them talking." "We need to be cautious and get ready," Gareth urged, his heart pounding. "We can't let them catch us off guard." Layla's eyes widened with alarm. "What do we do?" "Stay quiet and gather anything we might need." "We need to protect ourselves and each other," he replied, his voice steadying as he took charge of the situation. Penn nodded, her eyes alight with determination. "Right. Let's move quickly, then." They sprang into action, gathering supplies and preparing for whatever threat lay outside. As they worked together, Gareth felt a renewed sense of purpose. In the face of uncertainty, he had found a team, an unlikely family bound by resilience and the willingness to fight back against the darkness. Chapter 4: The Calm Before the Storm. The tension in the room crackled like electricity as they prepared for whatever might come. Gareth's heart raced, fueled by adrenaline and fear, but also a deep-seated determination to protect his newfound friends. He had never expected to find himself in a situation like this, but there was no backing down now. "Is everyone ready?" he asked, scanning the room. Layla and Iris were grabbing flashlights and checking their supplies, while Penn was strapping on a utility belt, her expression fierce and resolute. "Ready as we'll ever be," Penn declared, her eyes sparkling with that same adventurous spirit that had drawn Gareth to her in the first place. "Stay close to me," Gareth instructed, feeling a surge of responsibility. "If we need to move quickly, we can't get separated." They nodded, and Gareth felt a sense of camaraderie wash over him. In that moment, he realized that they were in this together. "I'll keep watch at the door," Layla said, her voice steady. "If I see anything suspicious, I'll let you know." "Good idea," Gareth replied, feeling a sense of reassurance wash over him. We need to stay alert and be ready for anything. Iris turned to Pen, her expression serious. We've faced challenges before, but this feels different. We need to stay sharp. I know, Pen replied, her voice resolute. But we've got each other's backs, and that's what matters. As they took their positions, the room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Gareth could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. Time seemed to stretch as they waited, each minute feeling like an eternity. Gareth's mind raced, replaying the whispered conversation he had overheard. Who were those figures? What were they planning? The uncertainty gnawed at him, and he felt the need to protect Pen and the others like a fire in his belly. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside, jolting them into action. Gareth's heart raced as he exchanged glances with Pen, their expressions mirroring each other's determination. Let's move, he urged, leading them toward the nearest exit. As they reached the door, Layla's voice cut through the chaos. They're coming. We need to go now. Gareth nodded, adrenaline coursing through his veins as they pushed out into the night. The cool air hit them like a wave, and he could see the shadows of figures moving in the distance. His instincts kicked in, and he directed the group toward the nearest cover, a cluster of trees just beyond the house. They darted toward the trees, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. Gareth's heart raced as he glanced back, spotting the dark figures approaching, their intentions clear. Keep moving, he shouted, urging Pen and the others to stay close. They ducked into the cover of the trees, hearts pounding as they pressed against the trunks, holding their breath. Gareth's senses heightened, every sound and rustle around them amplified in the tense silence. What do we do now? Pen whispered, her eyes wide with urgency. Stay quiet, Gareth instructed, scanning the area for any signs of movement. We need to assess the situation before making any moves. The sound of footsteps grew louder, the shadows of their pursuers closing in. Gareth's heart thudded in his chest as he fought against the panic rising within him. They were outnumbered, but he refused to let fear take hold. Suddenly, one of the figures stepped into the dim light filtering through the trees, a tall man clad in dark clothing, his face obscured by a mask. Gareth's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the intensity in the man's eyes, a chilling determination that sent a shiver down his spine. We need to go now, he hissed, nudging Pen forward. They slipped deeper into the trees, moving cautiously as they searched for a way to evade their pursuers. The whispers of danger hung heavy in the air, and Gareth's instincts screamed for him to protect the ones he had come to care for. What's the plan? Layla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We find a way to outsmart them, Gareth replied, his mind racing. We can't let them corner us. If we can create a distraction, we might be able to slip. Right, Pen said, her eyes glinting with excitement. I have an idea. Before he could question her, she took off in the opposite direction, moving stealthily through the trees. Pen! Gareth called after her, panic rising in his chest. Trust me, she shouted back, her determination evident in her voice. Gareth exchanged glances with Iris and Layla, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But there was no time to waste. We follow her, he decided, heart racing as they darted after her. They moved quickly, following the sound of Pen's footsteps, their hearts pounding as they navigated the darkened woods. Every rustle and whisper felt amplified in the tense silence, heightening their senses. As they drew closer to Pen, they saw her crouched low, peering out from behind a thick bush. She gestured for them to be quiet, her eyes alight with mischief. There's a way to confuse them, she whispered excitedly. If we can lead them in the wrong direction, we can slip away. What do you have in mind? Gareth asked, intrigued yet wary. I can create a diversion, she replied, determination radiating from her. If I make some noise over there, she pointed to a cluster of rocks a few yards away. They'll head that way while we sneak around the back." Gareth felt a mixture of admiration and concern for her bravery. "Are you sure?" "It's risky." "Nothing ventured, nothing gained," Penn said, her eyes sparkling with resolve. Gareth nodded, recognizing that her spirit was a force to be reckoned with. "All right, but be careful. We'll watch your back." Penn smiled, her confidence infectious. "I got this." With that, she slipped away, moving like a shadow through the trees. Gareth held his breath, watching as she approached the rocks, her heart racing with adrenaline. "Ready?" Layla whispered beside him, her expression tense. "Ready," Gareth replied, his heart pounding as they waited for the signal. Penn picked up a few small stones, tossing them against the larger ones, creating a series of loud clattering noises. The sound echoed through the woods, drawing the attention of the figures in the distance. Over there, one of the figures shouted, their voices rising in urgency. Gareth exchanged a glance with Layla and Iris, their expressions mirroring his determination. "Now," he urged, leading the charge toward the back, their hearts pounding in unison. As they moved stealthily through the underbrush, they could hear the figures breaking through the trees, the sounds of confusion filling the air. "Go, go, go!" Layla urged, her voice a quiet whisper of encouragement. They slipped away, hearts racing as they navigated through the dense foliage, moving further away from the chaos. With every step, Gareth felt a surge of relief washing over him, the tension easing as they distanced themselves from danger. Eventually, they reached a small clearing, the moonlight spilling over them in a gentle glow. Gareth paused to catch his breath, adrenaline coursing through him as they huddled together. "That was brilliant, Penn," he exclaimed, his voice filled with admiration. Penn beamed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I told you it would work." Iris shook her head in disbelief, a smile tugging at her lips. "You're a madwoman, you know that?" "Only the best kind," Penn replied, her laughter ringing through the night air. Gareth felt a swell of gratitude for the bond they were forging, even in the face of danger. They had become a team, united by their resolve to face the unknown together. But even as they reveled in their victory, Gareth couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. The shadows were still lurking, and he knew they needed to remain vigilant. "Let's keep moving," he urged, glancing around to ensure they were still safe. "We can't linger too long. They'll realize what happened and come searching for us." With that, they resumed their journey, hearts pounding and spirits high. As they moved through the darkness, Gareth felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. They were facing the unknown together, and no matter what awaited them, he would do everything in his power to protect the ones he had come to care for. The night stretched on, filled with uncertainty and promise, as they ventured deeper into the wilderness, ready to confront whatever awaited them in the abyss. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting a silvery glow over the forest as Gareth led the way, his senses heightened by the events that had just unfolded. The branches rustled softly above them, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. Penn walked closely beside him, her expression a mix of exhilaration and focus, while Layla and Iris kept a vigilant watch behind. "Do you think they saw us?" Layla whispered, her voice barely above the rustle of leaves. Gareth shook his head. "I don't think so. We managed to slip away before they realized what was happening. But we can't let our guard down. They'll be on the hunt now." Iris nodded, her eyes scanning the shadows. "We need to find a place to regroup and figure out our next move. We can't keep running indefinitely." "Agreed," Gareth replied. "Let's head toward the ridge. There's an old lookout point that might give us a better vantage point and some time to catch our breath." As they navigated through the trees, the sound of distant voices echoed in the night, a reminder of the danger they faced. Gareth's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline but from the weight of responsibility he felt for the group. They were a family now, and he would do everything in his power to keep them safe. After a while, they reached the ridge, its rocky terrain offering a breathtaking view of the valley below. The moonlight illuminated the landscape, casting shadows that danced among the trees. They settled on a flat rock, exhaustion beginning to creep in. "Are we safe here?" Penn asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she looked out over the expanse. "For now," Gareth replied, trying to reassure her. "But we need to be cautious. If they're searching for us, they might come this way." Layla took a deep breath, leaning back against the rock. "What's the plan? We can't just wait here forever." Gareth glanced at Penn, who was still buzzing with energy. "We'll take a moment to rest, then we can discuss our next steps. We need to figure out who those people were and what they wanted." Penn nodded, her excitement tempered by the reality of their situation. "What if they're after something specific? Like information?" "That's a possibility," Gareth replied, pondering the implications. "But we need to gather more information before making any assumptions. We can't jump to conclusions." As they took a moment to catch their breath, the stars twinkled above them, and Gareth felt a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty. They had managed to escape, but he knew the night was far from over. "What if we set up some traps?" Penn suggested, her eyes lighting up with mischief. "If they come looking for us, we can catch them off guard." "That could work," Gareth agreed, impressed by her resourcefulness. "We could use the terrain to our advantage. Layla, can you help gather some materials?" "Sure," Layla replied, her excitement returning. "I can find some branches and stones to make tripwires or noise traps. Iris, can you keep an eye out for any movement while we prepare?" Gareth asked, his mind racing with possibilities. "Of course," Iris responded, her tone serious. "I'll keep watch." As Layla and Penn moved to gather materials, Gareth settled down next to Iris, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. "What do you think their plan is?" he asked quietly. "I'm not sure," Iris replied, her brow furrowed. "But they seemed organized, like they knew exactly what they were doing. We should be on high alert." "I know," Gareth said, feeling a knot of worry tighten in his stomach. "We can't underestimate them. They could have reinforcements, and we need to be prepared for anything." As Layla and Penn returned with their gathered materials, they began to work together, crafting makeshift traps and setting up a perimeter around their position. The camaraderie strengthened their resolve, and for a moment, Gareth felt a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. "All right, we're ready," Layla said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. "This should slow them down if they come this way." Gareth nodded, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Let's keep watch and stay alert. We can take turns to ensure someone is always on guard." As the night deepened, they settled into a watchful rhythm, taking turns keeping lookout while the others rested. Gareth remained on high alert, his senses heightened by the sounds of the forest. The distant hooting of an owl echoed in the night, reminding him of the unpredictable nature of their situation. Hours passed, and just as Gareth began to feel a sense of calm wash over him, a sound broke through the stillness, a twig snapping in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. "Everyone, quiet," he whispered urgently, his heart racing as he crouched low, eyes fixed on the direction of the noise. They all fell silent, their breaths shallow as they listened intently. The footsteps grew closer, a chilling reminder that their pursuers were still searching for them. Gareth's mind raced with possibilities. How many were there? What did they want? Suddenly, a shadow moved through the trees, and Gareth's heart dropped as he recognized the figure, one of the dark-clad individuals from before, prowling cautiously through the underbrush. Gareth could see the glint of something metallic in the figure's hand, and a wave of dread washed over him. "Penn," he whispered, motioning for her to be silent. She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They needed to remain hidden until they could figure out a plan. As the figure drew closer, Gareth felt the weight of the moment settle over him, the air thick with tension. But just as the figure was almost upon them, a sudden noise erupted from one of the traps they had set, the sound of branches snapping and stones clattering. The figure froze, looking around in confusion. "Over there," a voice called out from the distance, and Gareth felt his heart race. They were being hunted, but perhaps this was their chance. "Now!" Gareth hissed, and the group sprang into action, moving stealthily away from the ridge, hearts pounding as they navigated through the darkness. "Go! Go! Go!" Pen urged, adrenaline surging through her as they made their escape. Gareth led the way, determination fueling his steps as they raced deeper into the forest, weaving through the trees in a desperate bid to evade their pursuers. The sounds of chaos echoed behind them, the footsteps of the figures scrambling to regroup, the rustling of branches as they searched. "Where do we go now?" Layla gasped, her breath coming in quick bursts as they pressed on. "Head toward the river," Gareth urged, recalling the winding path he had taken in the past. "We can use the water as cover. It'll mask our scent and make it harder for them to track us." They pushed forward, hearts racing as they followed Gareth's lead. The sound of rushing water grew louder, the river a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Just as they reached the banks, Gareth turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows behind them, eyes gleaming with determination. "Run!" he shouted, urgency lacing his voice as they dove into the thick underbrush by the river. The cool water splashed against his skin as they plunged into the shallows, quickly moving along the edge, the current carrying their scent away. The adrenaline surged through him, but Gareth could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They needed to regroup and strategize, but first, they needed to escape the immediate threat. As they pressed onward through the water, the sounds of their pursuers faded into the distance, the rush of the river drowning out the chaos. Once they were far enough away, they found a secluded spot along the bank where they could catch their breath. Gareth glanced around, ensuring they were safe before turning to the group. "Are we all okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I think so," Pen replied, her eyes bright with adrenaline. "But we need to keep moving. They'll be back." "Right," Layla said, her voice steady. "But we can't just run forever. We need a plan." Gareth nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him again. "We regroup, gather our thoughts, and figure out our next move. We can't let fear dictate our actions." "Agreed," Iris said, her expression resolute. "We need to take back control of the situation." With renewed determination, they began to discuss their next steps. The night was dark, but they had each other, and together they would face whatever awaited them in the abyss. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the thick canopy of trees, casting a warm glow on the forest floor. Gareth, Pen, Layla, and Iris huddled together, exhausted but resolute. They had spent the night moving cautiously along the riverbank, using the sounds of the rushing water to mask their footsteps and the chatter of their voices. "We should find a place to hide and gather our strength," Gareth suggested, glancing around at the dense underbrush. "Somewhere we can regroup and plan our next move." "I saw a cave not far from here," Layla piped up, brushing a twig from her hair. "It's a bit off the path, but it looked like it could provide good shelter." "Lead the way," Gareth urged, and with renewed energy, the group set off towards the cave. The trek was short, and they soon found themselves at the entrance of a narrow cave nestled between two large rocks. As they stepped inside, the cool air enveloped them, providing a welcome respite from the heat of the sun. "This should do," Gareth said, nodding in approval. "It's hidden enough to give us some privacy." The interior was dark and slightly damp, with a small ledge at the back that could serve as a makeshift resting area. They settled in, taking a moment to catch their breath. "I'm glad we escaped," Pen said, leaning against the wall, her eyes scanning the cave's entrance. But what do we do next? We can't keep running forever. Gareth nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. We need to understand who is after us and why. If they wanted something from us, they'll likely try to come after us again. We need to find a way to turn the tables. Do you think it has to do with the footage Samir showed you? Iris asked, her brows furrowed in thought. Possibly, Gareth replied, running a hand through his hair. But we need to gather more information. If we could somehow get back to the city or find someone who knows what's happening, we could get a clearer picture of the threat. I could go back to the village, Penn suggested, her voice firm. I have contacts there. People who might know more about what's going on. Gareth considered her suggestion. It's a risk, Penn. They may be watching the village closely. I know, but it might be our only chance. We can't just wait here forever, she insisted, determination shining in her eyes. Layla chimed in, I can go with her. If there's any danger, I'll make sure she gets out safely. No, Gareth interjected, feeling a surge of protectiveness. It's too risky for both of you. If they see you, it could jeopardize everything we're trying to do. What about me? Iris asked, her voice steady. I can blend in and gather information. I know how to be discreet. Gareth weighed their options, knowing the decision would have far-reaching consequences. All right, here's what we'll do. Penn, you and Iris will head to the village. Gather information and see if you can find out who's behind the attacks. Layla and I will stay here and keep watch, ready to act if anything goes wrong. Sounds like a plan, Penn replied, her eyes glinting with resolve. As they discussed their strategy, Gareth felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. They had a plan, a way to confront the unknown threat. But beneath that hope lay a current of fear, the fear of what awaited them outside the cave, the fear of the unknown. Hours passed, and as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the group prepared for their separation. Layla and Gareth exchanged worried glances, their bond forged through shared challenges, now tested by the uncertainty of the path ahead. Stay safe, Gareth urged Layla, placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll regroup here in 3 days. If you don't hear from us, you need to make your way to the safe house. I will, Layla replied, her voice steady. And you be careful too. Once they were ready, Penn and Iris stepped out of the cave, their silhouettes briefly illuminated by the sunlight before disappearing into the thick underbrush. Gareth watched them go, his heart heavy with concern. Do you think they'll be all right? Layla asked, breaking the silence as they sat in the cave. I hope so, Gareth replied, his gaze fixed on the cave entrance. But we need to prepare for the worst. They spent the next few hours fortifying their position, ensuring that they had the means to defend themselves if necessary. Gareth was impressed by Layla's resourcefulness as she fashioned makeshift traps and barriers using fallen branches and rocks. The cave slowly transformed into a safe haven, a fortress against the unknown. As evening approached, Gareth felt the tension in the air thicken. The silence of the forest was both comforting and unnerving, each rustle of leaves or snap of twigs causing his heart to race. They were alone, but they were also vulnerable. They believe she has powers. Abilities that could change everything, Mora replied, glancing around nervously. Be careful, Penn. They might come looking for you next. Thank you, Mora, Penn said, her mind racing as she absorbed the information. She needed to find Iris and share what she had learned. Meanwhile, Iris found herself in the tavern, a lively establishment filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. She approached the bar, where a burly man with a thick beard was serving drinks. Can I get a drink? Iris asked, trying to blend in with the lively crowd. What'll it be? The bartender asked, wiping a mug with a rag that looked as though it had seen better days. Just water for now, she replied, scanning the room for any signs of conversation that could lead to information. As she waited, she overheard two men at a nearby table speaking in hushed tones. "Did you hear about the girl they're looking for?" one man said, leaning closer to his companion. "The one who survived," the other replied, his voice low. "They say she escaped the city just before it was destroyed. They think she knows something important." Iris leaned closer, straining to catch every word. "What do they want with her?" "Something about a relic," the first man said, shaking his head. "They believe she has a connection to it. If they find her, they'll stop at nothing to get it." Iris's heart sank as she processed the information. It was clear that Penn was in danger, and whatever this relic was, it was the key to everything. She needed to warn her friend. "I'll take my drink to go," Iris said hurriedly, grabbing a mug before making her way back to the designated meeting spot. Meanwhile, Gareth and Layla remained hidden in the cave, holding their breath as the figures continued to search outside. Gareth's mind raced with strategies, but he knew they had to wait for the right moment to make their escape. "Do you think they know we're here?" Layla whispered, her voice barely audible. "I doubt it," Gareth replied, trying to keep his own voice steady. "They seem more focused on finding us than realizing we're right under their noses." Suddenly, one of the figures spoke up, their voice cutting through the night air. "I saw them come this way. They can't be far." Panic surged through Gareth's veins. "We need to move, now." "Where do we go?" Layla asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Back towards the river," Gareth said, pointing to a narrow passage at the back of the cave. "It's our best chance." With their hearts pounding, they made their way through the dark tunnel, the sound of their footsteps muted by the damp earth. As they emerged from the cave, they found themselves on the banks of the river, the moonlight shimmering on the water's surface. "We should keep low and stick to the shadows," Gareth instructed, scanning the area for any sign of danger. They moved stealthily along the riverbank, their breaths quick and shallow as they made their way downstream. The sound of the rushing water masked their movements, but Gareth couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. "We should find a place to hide," Layla whispered, glancing around anxiously. "If they find us out here." "We can't think like that," Gareth urged, his voice steady. "We need to focus on getting to safety." As they moved further down the river, they spotted a thicket of trees that could provide adequate cover. They crouched low, pressing their backs against the rough bark, trying to catch their breath. Just as Gareth thought they were safe, the sound of footsteps broke the silence again, this time closer and more determined. "Search everywhere." "They can't have gotten far," a voice shouted. Gareth's heart raced as he exchanged a glance with Layla. "They're getting closer. We need to keep moving." They quickly slipped deeper into the thicket, navigating through the dense underbrush. Gareth's instincts kicked in, guiding them away from the sounds of their pursuers. As they weaved through the trees, Gareth's mind raced with thoughts of Penn and Iris. He hoped they were safe, that they had managed to gather the information they needed. But the gnawing fear of losing them pushed him to move faster. Back in the village, Penn and Iris finally reunited, both breathless and anxious to share what they had learned. "I heard some alarming things," Penn, Iris said urgently, her eyes wide. "They're looking for you. They believe you have something important they need." Penn felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "A relic, something that's connected to you," Iris explained, her voice trembling. "If they find you, they won't stop at anything to get it." "I spoke with Mora," Penn replied, her tone serious. "She mentioned a shadowy group searching for a girl marked as special. This could be connected." "We need to get back to Gareth and Layla," Iris insisted, urgency coursing through her. "They need to know what we found out." "Let's head to the river," Penn suggested. "It's the safest route back. We can navigate through the trees to avoid being seen." They hurried through the village, moving as silently as possible. The stars overhead twinkled like distant eyes, watching their every move. They reached the riverbank, the sound of rushing water echoing around them. As they moved along the bank, Pen couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "We need to be careful," she whispered. "Something feels off." Just then, they heard voices nearby, the unmistakable sound of their pursuers. "Did you hear that?" "They must be close," one of the figures said, their tone menacing. "Spread out." "We can't let them escape," another voice shouted. Panic surged through Pen and Iris. "We have to hide," Pen hissed, grabbing Iris's arm and pulling her behind a large rock jutting out from the bank. They crouched low, holding their breaths as the figures passed by, oblivious to their presence. "I can't believe we're in this mess," Iris whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "We'll find a way out," Pen replied, determination shining in her eyes. "We just need to stay calm." As the sounds of the figures faded into the distance, they felt a momentary sense of relief. But the danger was far from over, and they knew they had to act quickly. "We need to regroup with Gareth and Layla," Pen said, scanning the area for any signs of their friends. "They'll know what to do next." Just as they prepared to move, the ground beneath them shook slightly, a distant rumble echoing through the trees. "What was that?" Iris asked, her voice quaking with uncertainty. "I don't know," Pen replied, her heart racing. "But we can't stick around to find out." They made their way upstream, urgency fueling their steps as they navigated through the dense underbrush. As they moved, Pen's mind raced with thoughts of the looming threat and the fate of her friends. Gareth and Layla continued their escape, weaving through the trees as the sounds of their pursuers faded into the background. The adrenaline coursed through Gareth's veins, pushing him to keep moving, to find safety for Layla and himself. "Do you think we lost them?" Layla asked, her voice barely above a whisper as they crouched behind a thick cluster of bushes. "For now," Gareth replied, glancing around cautiously. "But we can't stop. We need to keep moving until we're sure we're safe." As they crept through the underbrush, Gareth felt a sense of urgency growing within him. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted, and the thought of Pen and Iris facing danger alone weighed heavily on his heart. "We should head towards the old cabin," Gareth suggested. "It's secluded and should provide a temporary refuge." Layla nodded, determination etched on her face. "Let's go." They made their way through the forest, moving quickly but quietly, the moonlight guiding their path. As they approached the cabin, Gareth felt a flicker of hope. It had been abandoned for years, a remnant of a time long past, but it could serve as a shelter for them as they plotted their next move. "Look," Layla pointed, her voice steady. "The door is still intact." Gareth pushed the door open, the creaking sound echoing in the stillness of the night. Inside, the air was stale, and the remnants of old furniture lay scattered around the room. "Let's search the place for anything useful," Gareth said, his voice steady as he scanned the area. They began rummaging through the old belongings, uncovering faded maps, rusty tools, and forgotten trinkets. Just as they were about to give up, Layla stumbled upon an old trunk tucked away in the corner. "What's this?" she asked, pulling it open with a creak. Inside lay a collection of supplies, blankets, canned food, and a few forgotten weapons. "Perfect," Gareth said, relief flooding through him as they gathered what they could. "This will help us hold out until we figure out our next move." Suddenly, the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the trees, growing louder and closer. Gareth's heart raced as he exchanged a glance with Layla. "They found us," he whispered urgently. "We need to hide." They quickly moved to the far side of the cabin, pressing themselves against the wall as the footsteps grew closer. "We can't let them find us," Gareth urged, his heart pounding in his chest. As the figures approached the cabin, Layla's eyes widened in fear. "What do we do?" "We wait," Gareth replied, his voice steady. If we're quiet, they might pass by. The door swung open, and Gareth's breath caught in his throat. The figures entered, their silhouettes illuminated by the moonlight. "Search the place," one of them commanded, his voice low and menacing. "They can't have gone far." Gareth's heart raced as he and Layla held their breath, praying they wouldn't be discovered. As the figures began to search the cabin, Gareth's mind raced. They had to find a way out, to regroup with Pen and Iris before it was too late. Gareth's heart thundered in his chest as he watched the shadowy figures rummaging through the cabin. He and Layla remained pressed against the wall, barely daring to breathe. "Where could they be hiding?" one of the figures grumbled, his voice filled with frustration. "They can't have gone far," the other replied. "They were just here." Gareth's mind raced with possibilities. They needed a distraction, something to pull the intruders away from their hiding spot. Glancing around the dimly lit room, he noticed an old lantern hanging on the wall, a mere shadow of its former glory. "Layla," he whispered, nodding toward the lantern. "If I can reach that, I might be able to create a distraction." Layla's eyes widened in realization. "But if you're caught?" "I won't be." "Just trust me," Gareth urged, trying to keep his voice steady. He took a deep breath and carefully crept toward the lantern, every step calculated to minimize noise. As he reached it, he fumbled with the latch, the metal creaking under his touch. The two figures continued their search, oblivious to his movements. Gareth's heart raced as he pried the lantern off the wall. With a quick glance back at Layla, he positioned it near a stack of old, dry firewood piled against the wall. "Now," he whispered. Gareth struck a match, its flame flickering to life, and touched it to the wood. The flame caught quickly, and soon a small fire blazed to life. "Look," one of the intruders shouted, pointing towards the flickering light. "They're trying to start a fire. Let's check it out." With their attention diverted, Gareth seized the opportunity. "Come on," he hissed to Layla, and they slipped quietly out the back door of the cabin. Once outside, they crouched low behind the thick brush, peering around to see if they had attracted any attention. "Where do we go now?" Layla asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the fear evident in her eyes. "We head to the river," Gareth replied, his gaze darting around for any signs of danger. "It's our best bet to get away." They moved swiftly, staying low and quiet, navigating through the trees that lined the riverbank. The sounds of the crackling fire echoed behind them, and Gareth hoped it would keep their pursuers occupied long enough for them to escape. As they made their way along the river, Layla glanced back towards the cabin, worry etched on her features. "What if they find us again?" "They won't," Gareth assured her, though he couldn't shake his own anxiety. "We'll be cautious. We just need to keep moving." Suddenly, they heard voices again, this time much closer. Gareth's pulse quickened as they ducked behind a large boulder, the moonlight casting long shadows across the ground. "Split up." "We'll cover more ground that way," one of the figures commanded. "No." "We'll lose them," the other protested. "Stick together." Gareth held his breath, adrenaline pumping through him as he listened to the discussion. "Fine. We'll stay together," the first figure finally relented. "But they can't be far. Keep your eyes peeled." Gareth's heart sank. They were still on their trail, and he had to think quickly. "We need to find a place to hide," he whispered urgently to Layla. "Over there," she pointed to a cluster of tall reeds along the riverbank. "We can blend in there." Without hesitation, they scrambled towards the reeds, pushing their way through the dense foliage until they were almost completely concealed. The voices grew closer, and Gareth felt the tension in the air as they crouched low, the sound of their own breaths almost deafening in the silence. "Did you hear that?" one of the figures said, pausing as if sensing something. Gareth's heart raced as he strained to listen. "Probably just an animal." "Keep moving," the other replied dismissively. Gareth held his breath, praying they would pass by without discovering them. As the figures moved closer, Gareth felt a sense of urgency rising within him. He had to protect Layla and ensure they made it back to Pen and Iris. Just then, the bushes began to shake slightly, a rustling sound that seemed to come from behind them. Gareth turned, eyes wide, heart pounding. He saw a shadow slipping through the reeds, something moving just beyond their hiding spot. "Stay still," he whispered to Layla, his voice low and tense. The shadow emerged, a small animal, darting away from the sound of the approaching figures. "Did you see that?" one of the men asked, looking in their direction. "No, just keep moving," the other urged. The figures walked right past their hiding spot, their silhouettes illuminated by the moonlight, and Gareth felt a wave of relief wash over him. As the sound of their footsteps faded into the distance, Layla exhaled sharply. "That was too close." "Let's wait a little longer before we move," Gareth replied, his heart still racing. They remained hidden, their breaths synchronized as they listened for any sign of danger. Meanwhile, Pen and Iris were making their way along the riverbank, the sounds of the night surrounding them. Pen was acutely aware of the darkness closing in around them, and the weight of the looming threat felt heavier with every step. "I hope Gareth and Layla are okay," Iris said, worry threading her voice. "They have to be." "They're resourceful," Pen replied, though she felt a twinge of anxiety. "We'll find them. We just need to keep moving." As they reached a bend in the river, Pen spotted a flickering light in the distance. "Look," she said, pointing. "Do you see that?" Iris squinted into the darkness. "It looks like a fire." "Could it be Gareth and Layla?" "It might be," Pen said, her heart racing. "Let's go check it out." They hurried toward the light, moving quietly through the trees until they reached a clearing. To their surprise, they found not Gareth and Layla but a group of villagers gathered around a small fire, their expressions tense and serious. "Who are they?" Iris asked, confusion crossing her face. "I don't know, but we should be careful," Pen replied, scanning the group for familiar faces. As they approached cautiously, a woman with dark hair and fierce eyes turned to them. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low and urgent. "It's not safe." "We're looking for our friends, Gareth and Layla," Pen replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Gareth? Layla?" The woman's expression shifted from anger to concern. "You need to leave this place. They're coming for you." "What do you mean?" Iris asked, fear creeping into her voice. "There's a group hunting for anyone associated with the attacks," the woman explained, glancing around nervously. "They believe you hold the key to stopping them. You need to get away before it's too late." "Why are you helping us?" Pen asked, still wary. "Because we're all in this together," the woman replied. "I know what it's like to lose someone to those monsters. We need to fight back." As they spoke, the tension in the air grew thick, and Pen could sense the urgency. "We have to find Gareth and Layla. They could be in danger." The woman nodded, determination hardening her features. "We'll help you. But we need to move quickly. Gather your things, and we'll find them together." With newfound resolve, Pen and Iris joined the villagers as they prepared to search for Gareth and Layla, knowing that every second counted. The urgency of the situation pressed down on Pen and Iris as they gathered their belongings with the villagers. Pen's heart raced at the thought of Gareth and Layla in danger. The woman who had spoken to them, her name revealed to be Mara, moved swiftly through the crowd, rallying others to join their search. "Remember to stay low and quiet," Mara instructed. "We don't know how many of them are out there." They've become bolder. Pen nodded, her mind racing. She felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. She couldn't lose Gareth, not now, not when they were so close to uncovering the truth. The group split into pairs, and Pen and Iris teamed up with Mara. As they made their way along the riverbank, Pen's thoughts drifted to Gareth. She could picture him, his focus, his intelligence, and it gave her hope that he would be all right. "Do you think they're close?" Iris asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They have to be," Pen replied. "Gareth is resourceful. If anyone can find a way to stay hidden, it's him." As they moved cautiously through the underbrush, the moonlight flickered through the leaves, casting shadows around them. Every rustle of the foliage made Pen's heart jump, but she forced herself to stay focused. "What do you think they want with us?" Mara asked, breaking the silence. Pen took a deep breath, recalling the discussions of piracy and the ominous reports they had overheard. "They think we know something about the attacks. Maybe they believe we have information that could stop them. Or they want to silence us," Iris added, her voice trembling. Pen felt a chill at Iris's words. "We can't let that happen. We have to find Gareth and Layla first, and then we'll figure out our next move." As they continued their search, the tension in the air thickened. Pen could feel her instincts sharpening, and she sensed that they were getting closer to their friends. Suddenly, a rustling noise caught her attention. The sound echoed through the trees, and she motioned for the group to stop. "What was that?" Mara whispered, her expression shifting to one of caution. "I don't know, but we should check it out," Pen replied, her heart pounding in her chest. Creeping forward, they followed the sound, their senses heightened. They moved quietly, careful to avoid any branches that might snap underfoot. As they approached the source of the noise, they caught sight of a figure standing just ahead, partially obscured by the underbrush. Pen squinted, trying to make out who it was. "Gareth," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure turned, and to her relief, it was indeed Gareth, his expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Pen!" "Iris!" he exclaimed, moving toward them. Before they could embrace, Layla stepped out from behind him, her face flushed and relieved. "Thank the stars! We thought we lost you." Pen rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Layla. "We were so worried." "What happened?" Gareth stepped closer, a serious look on his face. "We need to talk. It's not safe here." "Agreed," Mara said, her gaze shifting back toward the shadows. "We should move quickly. We don't have much time." They regrouped, sharing hurried whispers about their experiences and the dangers they had encountered. Gareth explained how they had narrowly escaped their pursuers, emphasizing the need for caution moving forward. "Can we trust these villagers?" Gareth asked, glancing at Mara. "They're good people," Layla assured him. "They've been helping us." With their plans set, the group decided to move deeper into the forest, away from the riverbank, where they could regroup and plan their next steps. As they made their way through the dense foliage, Pen couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung in the air. The further they went, the more she felt the weight of the impending confrontation. After a while, they reached a small clearing, a natural hideaway shielded from prying eyes. The group settled down, exhaustion evident on their faces, but the urgency of their situation kept them alert. "We need to understand what we're up against," Gareth began, his voice steady. "The attacks are escalating, and we can't afford to be caught off guard again." Mara nodded in agreement. "There are whispers among the villagers. Some say there's a powerful group behind these attacks, people who want to control the trade routes and silence anyone who stands in their way." "Do you think they're working with the pirates?" Pen asked, her mind racing with possibilities. "It's possible," Gareth replied. "But we need more information. We can't just sit here and wait." Layla spoke up, her expression determined. "What if we confront them directly? Find out who's behind this?" "It's risky," Mara cautioned. "We don't know how many there are or what kind of power they wield. We need a plan." Penn felt a surge of determination. What if we split up? We can gather intelligence from different areas, see if we can piece together what's happening. Divide and conquer, Gareth mused, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. That might work, but we need to ensure we can communicate and regroup quickly. Mara suggested, we have a few old radios from before the attacks. They may still work. We can use those to stay in touch. With a plan forming, the group quickly set to work. They divided their tasks and assigned areas to scout, ensuring that they would remain in close contact throughout their search. As Penn and Layla prepared to head out, Penn couldn't help but glance back at Gareth. "Be careful," she said, her voice softening. "I will," he promised, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "You too." With that, they set off into the night, hearts pounding with the anticipation of uncovering the truth. The night air was thick with tension as Penn and Layla navigated through the trees, each sound magnified in the silence. They arrived at a small clearing, illuminated by the pale glow of the moon. "Do you think this is where the meetings are happening?" Layla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could be," Penn replied, her instincts telling her they were getting closer to something significant. They moved cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of activity. Penn's heart raced as she caught sight of flickering lights in the distance, definitely signs of a gathering. "Let's get a better look," Penn suggested, gesturing for Layla to follow her. They crept closer, crouching low behind a large boulder that provided ample cover. Peering out, they were able to see a group of shadowy figures gathered around a fire, their voices low but tense. "The shipments are getting disrupted," one man said, his tone sharp. "If we don't do something soon, we'll lose everything." Another figure, taller and more imposing, leaned forward. "We can't let the villagers get in our way. They think they can just band together and fight us. We need to make an example of them." Penn felt a chill run down her spine. "They're serious," she whispered to Layla, her heart pounding. "We have to warn the others." Layla nodded, her face pale. "But how do we get back without being seen?" Just then, a loud snap echoed through the clearing, and both girls froze. They exchanged worried glances as the group around the fire turned their attention toward the sound. "Did you hear that?" the imposing figure asked, his voice low and menacing. The tension was palpable as Penn and Layla quickly ducked behind the boulder, holding their breaths as they tried to remain unseen. "Search the area," the man commanded. "Find out if anyone is here." As the figures began to scatter, Penn and Layla knew they had to act fast. "We can't stay here," Layla urged, her eyes wide with fear. "Follow me," Penn whispered, taking a deep breath before moving toward a narrow path behind the boulder. They slipped away, heartbeats racing, until they reached a thicket that provided cover. Penn could hear the voices of the men growing fainter behind them, but the urgency of their mission drove them forward. "Let's regroup with the others," Penn said, leading the way back toward their hideout. Once they were safely back with Mara and the rest of the group, Penn wasted no time recounting what they had witnessed. "They're planning something big," Penn said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "They want to take control of the trade routes, and they're not afraid to make examples out of anyone who gets in their way." Mara's expression hardened. "We need to rally the villagers. They have to know what's coming." Gareth stepped forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "We can't just warn them, we need a plan to counter their moves. If we don't act, we could lose everything." "I have a few ideas," Layla chimed in, her determination shining through the fear. "If we can create diversions, it might give us the time we need to gather resources and organize a defense." Penn nodded, feeling the surge of energy and hope. "We can set traps along the paths they use to move their shipments. If we can slow them down, we might be able to buy enough time to prepare the villagers for a fight." "Exactly," Gareth agreed. But we'll need everyone on board. We can't do this alone. With the group's spirits lifted, they began to outline their plans, working late into the night, determined to fight back against the looming threat. As dawn began to break, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the trees, casting a warm glow over the clearing. Pen looked around at her friends, feeling a sense of unity and resolve. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said, her voice steady. "It's about everyone in the village. We fight for them and for our home." The group nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They were ready to take a stand. With their plans set, the group worked tirelessly over the next few days to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Pen and Gareth took charge of strategizing the traps, while Layla, Mara, and the others rallied the villagers to organize defenses and gather supplies. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of fear and determination as the community banded together, ready to protect their home. As the days passed, the tension in the air thickened. The villagers could feel the weight of the impending battle, and whispers of the looming threat spread like wildfire through the community. Pen found herself at the forefront of the preparations, determined to make a difference. On the eve of the anticipated confrontation, the group gathered in a clearing surrounded by the villagers. The mood was solemn but resolute. Pen stood before them, her heart pounding as she addressed the crowd. "We face a threat that seeks to destroy everything we hold dear," she began, her voice steady. "But together, we are stronger. We have a chance to protect our home and our way of life. We will fight for each other and for our future." The villagers responded with a cheer, their spirits lifted by her words. It was a moment of unity that Pen would cherish forever. They spent the night fortifying their defenses, setting traps, and preparing for the battle ahead. Dawn broke on the day of the confrontation, the sun rising over the horizon as the villagers took their positions. Pen's heart raced as she stood alongside Gareth, Layla, and Mara, watching the path that led to their village. "We need to remain vigilant," Gareth said, scanning the area. "Once they arrive, we can't let them catch us off guard." As the hours passed, the tension grew. The sound of rustling leaves and distant voices echoed through the trees, sending chills down Pen's spine. She felt a mix of fear and determination as the moment they had prepared for finally arrived. Suddenly, a group of men emerged from the forest, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. They moved with purpose, and the villagers readied themselves for the confrontation. "Remember our plan," Pen called out, her voice strong despite the pounding of her heart. "We stick together." The men approached, their eyes scanning the area, and as they drew closer, Pen felt a surge of adrenaline. She had never been in a situation like this before, but she was determined to stand her ground. "Is this where you make your stand?" the imposing leader called out, a smirk playing on his lips. "You think you can stop us?" "Not just for ourselves," Pen shouted back, her voice steady. "We fight for our home and our people." With that, the battle erupted. The villagers sprang into action, utilizing the traps they had set to slow down their attackers. The sounds of shouts, clashes, and chaos filled the air as both sides fought fiercely. Pen moved with purpose, her instincts kicking in as she helped direct the villagers. Gareth fought alongside her, his presence a reassuring constant amidst the chaos. Layla and Mara were by their side, each taking on the threats as they arose. The battle raged on, and Pen could feel the tide shifting. The villagers fought with everything they had, fueled by the desire to protect their home. Pen's heart raced as she saw Gareth take down one of the attackers, his movements swift and precise. But just when they seemed to gain the upper hand, the leader of the attackers shouted a command, and the remaining men regrouped, launching a counterattack. The situation grew dire as the villagers found themselves overwhelmed. Just when all hope seemed lost, Pen felt a surge of determination. "We can't give up," she shouted, rallying the villagers around her. We fight for each other. We can't let them take our home." Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of the villagers. With renewed vigor, they pushed back against their attackers, using their surroundings to their advantage. The traps they had set began to take their toll on the invaders, creating openings for the villagers to strike. Gareth caught her eye, and for a moment, the world around them faded. "We can do this," he said, his voice steady. "Together." As the battle continued, Penn and Gareth worked seamlessly, their movements synchronized as they fought side by side. The bond they had forged through their trials only grew stronger, propelling them forward. Finally, they managed to corner the leader of the attackers, who realized the tide had turned against him. His confidence faltered as he found himself surrounded by determined villagers. "This isn't over," he shouted, trying to assert control. "You will pay for this." "You'll pay for threatening our home," Penn replied, her voice unwavering. "You don't scare us anymore." With a final push, the villagers overcame the last of the attackers, sending them fleeing into the woods. Cheers erupted from the group, a chorus of relief and victory echoing through the clearing. As the dust settled and the last remnants of the confrontation faded, Penn and her friends took a moment to catch their breath. They stood together, weary but victorious, the weight of the battle still fresh in their minds. "We did it," Layla said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Gareth nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "We fought for what we believed in, and it worked." Mara stepped forward, her expression proud. "You all showed incredible bravery today. This village will remember your courage." As they began to regroup and assess the aftermath, Penn felt a sense of hope wash over her. They had fought for their home and had emerged victorious. The village would heal, and they would continue to stand strong against any threats that might come their way. "Now we can rebuild," Penn said, her voice steady. "Together." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the village, Penn looked around at the faces of her friends and neighbors. She knew that they had forged a bond that would last a lifetime, a bond of strength, courage, and unity. With a renewed sense of purpose, Penn smiled at Gareth, grateful for his unwavering support. Together, they had faced unimaginable challenges, and together, they would continue to face whatever came next. In that moment, she felt a sense of belonging, a sense of home, and she knew that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. Weeks passed, and the village began to heal from the battle. The scars of conflict would always remain, but the spirit of resilience thrived within the community. Penn and her friends worked tirelessly to rebuild, forging new relationships with the villagers and strengthening their bonds. The threat of the attackers had diminished, but the villagers remained vigilant. They knew that they had to be prepared for any future challenges, and together, they began to train and organize. Penn often found herself reflecting on their journey, the trials they had faced, the friendships they had forged, and the battles they had fought. Each experience had shaped her into a stronger person, and she felt a newfound sense of purpose. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Penn stood on the hill overlooking the village, joined by Gareth. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "Yeah, we have," she replied, her heart full. "And we still have a long way to go." Gareth smiled, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "Together, we can take on anything. I wouldn't want to do this with anyone else." As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Penn felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that they were ready to face whatever came next, hand in hand, heart to heart. In that moment, surrounded by the love of her friends and the strength of her community, she realized that they had not only fought for their home but had also discovered what it truly meant to belong. Together, they would continue to write their story, a story of resilience, courage, and hope, a story that would echo through the ages, reminding them of the power of unity and the strength found in friendship.